Alright everybody, hey, 10 News Meteorologist Grant Gilmore here with you, just making sure we are up and running and good to go with this update about Hurricane Maria. We'll touch on Hurricane Jose and Tropical Depression Lee as well, but the most important thing is going to be our discussion about Hurricane Maria and how it tracked and how it's going to be moving through the Caribbean over the next couple of days, and probably more importantly for us here in Florida, how it will not be having a direct impact on us here in the Bay Area. So let me just finalize everything, get everything set up, and then we can kind of talk about where Maria is going to be tracking and where the impacts are going to be felt more directly, which obviously are going to be in the Caribbean as the storm system continues to strengthen. Unbelievable, the latest update just coming down here, and the storm already a Category 3 hurricane, strengthening very quickly this morning, and then will likely continue to remain a major hurricane over the next few days. So here is the latest. This is the 11 o'clock advisory just coming down from the National Hurricane Center. So a major hurricane with winds of 120 miles per hour as it approaches the Lesser Antilles right now, just taking it down right about over Martinique right now. The outer eye wall still a good ways off from Martinique right now, about 50 to 60 miles east of Martinique, but the storm will continue to move to the west-northwest, so heading towards Martinique and all of the other islands there, the extreme eastern fringe of the Caribbean. So it's moving around 10 miles per hour, and it will likely maintain that speed here over the next couple of days. So looking at the latest tropical alerts in effect, we have numerous hurricane warnings in effect for the Lesser Antilles and the Leeward Islands. And then of course the poor Virgin Islands, already just, been hit very hard by Hurricane Irma just about a week and a half ago, and now looking at a potentially catastrophic hurricane once again. I don't know how you categorize another catastrophic hurricane when they've already seen catastrophe, but that's what they have. Now also to the north, while we're talking about the tropical alerts, we have tropical storm warnings in effect for the Outer Banks of North Carolina up into the mid-Atlantic states, and then tropical storm watches farther north up to the northeast through New Jersey, New York, and even as far north as Massachusetts, where we have tropical storm watches in effect. That is because of Jose. The latest track from Jose keeps the center of the storm off the coast, but it still will bring a good bit of surf and some winds and even a little bit of rain, especially up towards Massachusetts for them. Let's talk about Maria here. So this is the latest forecast for Maria. Already a Category 3 hurricane, taking that track to the north and west with the center of the storm passing right over Puerto Rico. So that's going to be tough. So this time frame, roughly Wednesday morning through the day on Wednesday into Thursday morning, is when it's going to be moving through Puerto Rico. Now the U.S. Virgin Islands right here. So looking, that's St. Thomas, that's St. John, and this is St. Croix way down here, and then the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, a little bit farther north there. So that area doesn't look like they see the eye move directly over, but still a large storm is going to be impacting the northern part of the Caribbean up into the Dominican Republic, continuing into the second half of the week. I was doing a little bit of research earlier on, and the last time Puerto Rico was hit by a Category 4 or Category 5 was in the 20s, so it's been a long time since they have sustained a direct hit from such a strong storm as Maria looks like it's going to be. Now, the track beyond Thursday, from this point, really does resemble Hurricane Irma. Now, if you'll remember, going back to 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how there was a lot of uncertainty in the forecast beyond that day 4 and day 5 for that turn to the north. There is much more confidence that we do see this turn to the north occur, whereas with Irma, the confidence was relatively low. The forecast models were uncertain of what was going to happen. We were looking at several elements coming together that we were waiting on to potentially turn Irma to the north. Now, Maria it's a lot more of a clear-cut path, mainly because of Hurricane Jose. Hurricane Jose kind of opening the door, if you will, and making a weakness in the upper level pattern to allow Maria to turn to the north and sort of follow in a similar path. And just to show you the forecast models, all of the forecast models take that turn and curve it to the north. So the forecast for Maria basically following this track right here. So that's roughly the path. Let me draw that again for us here, if I can get my mouse to work for us. So the path, the forecast track, almost taking the center line right there. So that's the path. And like I was mentioning, it's really following right in the path that Hurricane Jose is opening up for us. So I'm going to switch back over to this map here. So what's occurring is we've got an area of high pressure. We have an area of high pressure right here. And pardon these, I'm having a tough time with our mouse, so you'll have to forgive me here. But we have an area of high pressure which is situated just to the north. So we have a high right here. And we have another high pressure system right here. So what Jose is doing is it's creating a weakness in between those two high pressure systems, okay? So as Maria tracks to the north and west, it's going to go right along the fringe of this area of high pressure. So imagine this area of high pressure right here. So what's going to be going on is as Maria continues to track to the west, it's going to ride right along the fringe of that high, and it's going to find that weakness that Jose has found in between those two areas of high pressure, and that's why we see that turn to the north. Now, going back to Irma, that area of high pressure was much stronger. The area of high pressure with Irma extended all the way out here, like that. We did not have a hurricane out there. So that's why, as Irma rounded the base of that ridge of high pressure, that's why it went up in this track here, and then it was eventually picked up by an upper level disturbance that was up here, and that's when it turned it to the north. So some similar features at play here. We have that ridge of high pressure that's at play, that's kind of steering Maria right now. But as Maria reaches the fringe of that ridge of high pressure, which is situated right about here, that's when it's going to make that turn to the north and follow in the path of Jose. So we're fairly confident in that turn to the north, and I'll say much more confident in the turn to the north than what we saw with Irma. So even though the path looks very, very similar, at least in the near term, I've got to tell you, we have to rely on these models. We have to rely on the pattern that we see right now that is, while similar over the next 3 days, over the next 5 to 10 days, it looks very, very different compared to what we saw with Irma. So rest assured, at least the way that it looks right now, Florida's going to be just fine. We're going to see this thing pass by, and it really isn't going to be a concern for us. Just to show you kind of the upper level pattern here, if I can pull in this. It may take a while for our data to load. I haven't loaded this graphic quite yet. If it doesn't load, we'll just forget it. But overall, the forecast for Maria, while devastating and tragic for the Caribbean, I'll tell you, I cannot imagine being in the Caribbean right now. And for those people down in the Virgin Islands, from St. Thomas to St. John over to Puerto Rico, it's going to be a tough week for them. And that graphic is not loading, so we'll call it quits there. Again, Maria not following in the exact same footsteps as Irma, though it is moving through the Caribbean, pretty typical. But the official forecast, which has just come down from the Hurricane Center, does take it through the northeastern Caribbean, very similar to Irma. But Maria does look like it turns north around the Turks and Caicos and sort of missing the Bahamas, and right now it looks like it misses Florida altogether as well. So I see a lot of you commenting saying, thoughts and prayers for the Caribbean into the Virgin Islands, thoughts and prayers for Puerto Rico as well. Looking at Denise Barrios asking about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is right in the path of Maria, so I'm sure people in Puerto Rico right now are having to get their plans in order. If that includes evacuation for them, we'll have to see how things play out. They've got another couple of days until the storm hits, but certainly Puerto Rico needs to be putting their preparations together and wrapping things up, because things are going to begin to go downhill pretty quickly for them. Not so much today or even really tomorrow, but definitely tomorrow night is when the worst of the storm will be arriving, with wind speeds as high as 150 miles per hour. Terry saying you think you need to watch Jose to make sure it stays. Now, yeah, I mean, Jose is definitely, look at this forecast track. So this is where Jose has been. That's the forecast track, but look at where Jose did this very atypical loop here, looping around, and then has been hanging way out off the Florida coast for the last week or so. And now it's tracking up to the north. But just look, it continues to do some weird things. It gets caught underneath this ridge of high pressure that's sitting right here. And that's the thing. That's why Maria is actually going to be able to follow in his footsteps, because Jose is sort of kind of breaking down this ridge of high pressure up here, and it's going to kind of weaken that part of the atmosphere. High pressure is going to be to the east and then out to the west as well. And this area right here, if I can delete that, we'll have these two ridges of high pressure. Meanwhile, that is what's going to allow Maria to track up to the north like that. So Jose definitely playing a part in the track of Maria. While it's not going to weaken it or anything like that, it's definitely allowing for Maria to take more of that path and allow it to round the fringe of that ridge of high pressure, which is situated just out to the north. So that's kind of the ridge of high pressure right now, and that's what will be steering Maria around the ridge, unfortunately, through Puerto Rico, kind of just north of the DR, and then missing much of the Bahamas and heading up towards Bermuda. Some of you, Cheryl, saying Jose is drunk. It's definitely taken the long route, hasn't it? It hasn't really been efficient with its movement through the Atlantic. Okay, so James Cooley asking about Tropical Depression Lee. Let's go back and talk about Tropical Depression Lee real quick. Lee is actually continuing to weaken, even though that we've seen a flare-up in activity over the last 12 hours or so. Let me take you down there. So there's Lee. Lee will continue to weaken. It's forecast to actually become just a remnant low later today. Let me find the latest track of Lee here. I made that earlier this morning. We really haven't done much with it today because it's way out in the Atlantic. But that's the latest forecast for Lee. Remnant low over the next couple of days. It will dissipate and be a non-issue as we head through the middle of the week. So really not concerned about Lee anymore. It had a brief period to strengthen, and now it's weakening and no longer a concern for anyone, and not that it ever really was. But that's the deal with Lee. The main concern, honestly, is going to be with Maria. Even though we have some watches and warnings out for Tropical Storm Jose. As Jose weakens over the next couple of days, it shouldn't have a direct impact on the Northeast, though. I mean, don't get me wrong, still some rip currents and some rough surf and probably even some rain and wind for the Northeast. It doesn't look like Jose poses a direct threat to the Northeast as we head into the weekend. Let's see. A lot of you just, wishing your prayers, and I think that's what we have to do is, keep our thoughts and in for the Caribbean over the next week and honestly beyond, because it's going to take them a long, long time to recover from not just Irma, but obviously Maria as well, as we look at the latest satellite imagery of the storm. Again, tracking up to the north and west, heading right toward Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, the BVI and the USVI. Tough stuff out there, guys. I appreciate you hanging around. I've got to get ready for the new newscast. I will try to answer as many of your questions as I can, but I think the most important thing that I wanted to pass along to everyone, and I hope that you share it with everyone, some of your neighbors as well, is that Maria will not follow the exact path as Irma. After Thursday, it will begin that turn to the north We'll watch it, of course. There's that cone of uncertainty. Things can change. There's always, that possibility of things not playing out exactly how we expect them to. But compared to Irma, much more confidence in the forecast, a lot more consistency in our forecast model runs to suggest that turn to the north. So if things change, of course, you'll hear it from us first. There's nothing that we say on TV that we don't say behind the camera. So we try to keep it as honest and open and transparent as possible. We feel that that's the best way to, to give you the best forecast as we can, because if you're, in on the process and you understand, the confidence or the lack of confidence, then you have a better understanding of what to expect. So Maria not posing a threat to Florida, potentially, maybe the Carolinas, we'll see, but right now Florida looks like we'll be able to watch this one pass by. In the meantime, really watching closely to see how it develops over the next couple of days and its potential catastrophic impacts over Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So that's the latest update from us. We'll have a full rundown on the forecast coming up on 10 News midday. We hope you'll join us for that. Otherwise, we'll see you a little bit later on Facebook. Have a good day, guys.